Hello everybody, this is Albert with Green Tea House. I hope you're doing well today. Today we're going to talk about 2 ways to really ruin your herbals or your tisanes. Now before we begin, I highly recommend you check out our back episodes, especially the ones regarding herbals. So I'm recording here in Rome. I'm outside of the catacombs of San Callisto, which is probably the most famous of the catacombs. So if you're not familiar with the catacombs, they were where the early Christians, who were Catholics, hid during Roman persecution for the first 300 years or so before Christianity was legalized. And so I'm visiting here. I was lucky enough to have been here 20 years ago, so I'm blessed to have come back here again, this time to bring Casey. So we're on this ongoing series, ways to know if your green tea is crap, ways to know if your black tea are crap. I'll make sure I put banners up here for those. And this will be the third of that 3-part series, the return of the Jedi, so to speak, of this 3-part series, because I want to talk about herbals or tisanes, because these are very popular drinks. So again, let's review. I'll put a banner up here on what are tisanes, but we tend to use the word tea behind some of our favorite herbals. Oh, I love peppermint tea. Oh, I love chamomile tea. Now, that is an innocent mistake. So tea really only comes from the tea plant, which is the plant, the Camellia sinensis, or the Camellia sinensis assamica plant. And so we shouldn't use the word tea for anything else other than teas that come from that plant, which would be green tea, black tea, white tea, yellow tea, dark tea, and oolong. So anything else really is called a tisane. So a tisane would be a general word meaning herbal. So things that come from a side of a plant, whether they be the flower or the root or another part of it. So tisanes would be peppermint, chamomile, cinnamon, licorice, ginger, and a wide red raspberry, rose hip. I mean, there's tons of these tisanes. So let's call them what they are. So they're tisanes, but everyone else is going to keep calling them teas or maybe herbals. The only problem with calling them herbals is not all tisanes or teas that we drink come from the herb of something. So if you look at chamomile actually comes from the flower, not the herb. Either way. So what are the 2 main ways to ruin your tisanes? Number 1 is buying low-grade tisanes. So we've talked about it with black tea and green tea, how the large majority of packet teas are just complete garbage. They're made out of just the sandpaper or the grounded part of it. And so you're going to get low quality because you're not getting loose leaf tea. So it's the same thing with the tisanes. And if you look like the chamomile that we sell, it's the big blossoms of the dried flower. If you look at good licorice, it's going to be thick, kind of hay-like substance. If you look at rose hip, it's going to be the entire rose hip dried. But when you buy a lot of the tisanes dried in bags, you're not going to see that they're not the full intact herb, root, or whatever you're buying, because they're in a bag. And so that's a good sign that you're buying low-grade tea. So if you want to ruin your tisanes, one of them is just buying typical tea bag or even sachet, cinnamon, chamomile, peppermint, or whatnot. So the other thing is, let's say you are buying high-quality tisanes, like you're buying our tisanes or you're buying another product. The number 1 way to ruin it is you're not using the proper temperature. So if you're using a temperature that is too low, you're not going to optimize and maximize your tisane. So standard rule of thumb with all tisanes, whether it be red raspberry or echinacea or whatever we're talking about here, is full boil. So you want to go 212 degrees. You want to do a full boil on all of your tisanes. So temperature doesn't matter, because if you underheat, and this is the problem with the tisane. See, we've talked about like green tea, how the majority of green tea is underheated. So the majority of green teas are overheated. So you should be getting them around 170 in terms of temperature, but the majority of people put their green tea bag or sachet or even their loose leaf in full boil, and this is going to make your green tea bitter, as we've talked about many times before. So with the Camellia sinensis leaves, especially the ones that are least oxidized, the danger is that you're using water temperature that's too hot. The problem with the tisanes is that you're using water temperature that's too low. So luckily, it's much easier to get full boil water than to get 175 degree water. So with your tisanes, the main way to ruin it is you're underheating it, but that's not typically a problem because most people have a water kettle, or they'll have some sort of kettle that does the whistle sound when it's boiling, and then you just pour that hot water over it, preferably your loose leaf tisane, and it should be fine. And in terms of steeping time, I mean, you can do whatever you want. We've talked about, like, if you're going to reuse your tisane, which we recommend about 3 times, then only steep it for about 2.5 to 3 minutes. If you're not planning to reuse it, then steep it for 5 minutes. You get that full potency. And we'll put a banner up here about the subtleties and intricacies of steeping time. So in closing, what are the 2 ways to ruin your tisanes? 1, buy low quality tisanes, which are typically going to be found in tea bags. And number 2 is not using hot enough water temperature. Guys, post in the comments. I'd like to hear from you. I'm sorry about the sound and the prayers. Until next time, take care and God bless.